is your first time here, she does not usually blubber up here. I don't think she's ever blubbered, but I probably will today. Wow. So I used to direct children's choirs in my former life, and I'm going to pray the prayer that I would pray with them before our performances. God, help us. Amen. When you have 105 to 12-year-olds, what else do you pray? I mean, so I gotta say, my name is Melissa, if we haven't met. And I gotta say that as a woman and a student of missiology, which is a fancy seminary word for the study of mission, this is a very fun text to explore with you. I've spent the last few years studying in the Intercultural Studies program at Fuller Theological Seminary. Much of what we do is look at the different models of mission and church history and reflect on what it means to be a faithful witness to Jesus Christ. So that's what we're going to do today. In the text, we have Paul, who we're familiar with. We've heard of him. And Lydia, who, unless you were in Frank Lyman's class this week, maybe you'd never heard of her before. Thank you all for wearing purple. It does make me feel supported. Thank you. So if we look a few verses before this text, we see that Paul had his own ideas about where he was supposed to go, and the Spirit interrupted him at least twice. It does not say how, but I imagine it was creative. Then he has a dream of a man from Macedonia asking for his help, and being a person who is very sensitive to voices talking to him in dreams, he gets up and says, "Change of plans, we're going to Macedonia." So Paul and his companions head over, and they'd been there a couple of days, and they went outside the city looking for a place of prayer. There by the river, they sit down and talk to a group of women. Now, from our 21st century perspective, this is not a big deal. It happens all the time in our country. But at that point in history, this was not business as usual. First, they're talking to women, but even more incredible is the posture they take. Now, teachers, back in the day, did not stand in front of a whiteboard or a smartboard or stone and chisel and talk to their students. They sat down. So Paul and his friends are in the teaching posture. They're sitting with these women. Paul took a detour from his itinerary and crossed borders to get to Macedonia, and takes another detour, crossing the cultural norms and crossing boundaries to sit with these women and teach them. And my nerves are getting me, so excuse me. What we see over and over in the book of Acts is that lines and walls that have been carefully constructed to keep everyone in their place no longer exist. Enter Lydia, a woman from Thyatira and a dealer in purple cloth. Now, in general, in the Bible, when women are talked about, it is in relation to the men in their lives. They are somebody's daughter, they are somebody's wife. So here, we learn a couple of things about her that have nothing to do with the men she's related to. We learn where she's from, and we learn what she does for a job. We also learn that she's a worshiper of God. These descriptors give us a lot of information about her. She's successful. She deals in purple cloth. Only the wealthy can afford it. Even though some of us are wearing purple today, don't be confused. I am not wealthy. Especially after seminary. Okay. And more importantly, the Spirit has already been at work in her life. She doesn't worship multiple gods like most of the people from her hometown. She is already seeking the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When she hears Paul's words, the Spirit opens her heart to know the truth. She and her household are baptized and are the first followers of the way in Europe. And immediately, Lydia is using her gifts of persuasion and hospitality to get Paul and friends to stay at her home. She reminds me of some of my Hawaiian aunties. Actually, every auntie in Hawaii is like this. They fix you a plate, and they will offer you food even when you tell them you're not hungry. They will make you a plate to take home. There is no saying no. Like Lydia, because in some versions it says that she prevailed upon them until they said that they would stay, and that is Hawaiian Nancy's right there. They will prevail upon you until you sit down and eat. Which also makes me want some poke, but okay. I was really glad, side note, I was really glad when I moved to California and there's like some version of poke. Now, it is not Safeway poke that you get in Hawaii, but it'll do. So these 8 verses are what Ronald Cole Turner calls the inexplicable convergence of human faithfulness and divine guidance. Human faithfulness and divine guidance. At Fuller, we call this our CIQ, or Central Integration Question. That question is, at this point in your journey, how do you envision your call to God's mission in the world? At this point in my journey at Fuller, I've had to write about it a few times, and I'm in week 9 of 10 and getting ready to write about it again for some final papers. And the great thing about it is every time I've written about it, I've had a little bit different answer. Because while God's mission in the world never changes, our participation does. I would see that what I would have written before I had kids is drastically different than now that I have them. So, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a bit about what that's looked like for me. When I was a kid, I only remember wanting to be 2 things, a lawyer or an actress. It's really funny, I ended up in California. There's lots of opportunities for both. In other words, I love to talk, and I love a captive audience. The mystery of why I am so dramatic, I prefer the term animated, is solved. My grandmother was the most animated person that I've ever known, and if you've ever met my children, you know that those apples didn't fall far from the tree. And although he would deny it, my dad, as a preacher, very animated. Having grown up as a pastor's kid, the last thing I ever wanted to do was work for a church. And although in the 3rd grade I heard God tell me that I'd be a missionary, it is something I fought against for a very, very long time. At one point in college, when I didn't even think I believed in God, I was sitting in a class and I heard this passage from a Danish philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard, where he described Jesus as the most loving man who ever lived. In that moment, I knew that if I believed in anything, that was it. And I also knew that if I really believed that it required a response. So like Lydia, knowing what Paul said was the truth and immediately opening her home, I got to work. I've spent the last 17 years serving in the church. It's pretty funny for a person who never wanted to work for a church. A church has written my paycheck my entire adult life. I've served in a lot of capacities, sometimes reluctantly, and always with a level of skepticism that comes when you know the damage we can do to one another. In this time, I have never doubted that God's mission in the world was one of love and reconciliation, but I have often questioned the way the church has interpreted that, the way leaders that I've served under interpreted that, and have injured vulnerable people. I served under some people who injured me very deeply. Still working through those things. My decision to attend Fuller came at a time when I had very little faith in the church, which seminary is a really funny place to go when you think that, the church is a mess. I did not go to seminary thinking I could fix it. Just putting that out there. But I had this feeling that it was the next right thing to do. So I went. It's been a really healing experience for me, and one I will always be grateful for. And this is something I tell myself a lot as I start to repay my student loans. Our last couple years in Hawaii, I served under 2 of the kindest people I've ever known. Pastor Randy and Lori were my greatest encouragers as I juggled motherhood and work and seminary. Our church had been through a lot, and they were like a healing balm. Some people are like that, you know. The irony of leaving when things were at their best is not lost on me. So why then? Why leave Hawaii? Who leaves Hawaii? This is a question I've had to answer a lot in the last year. Well, the short version is we wanted our kids to grow up near their cousins and their grandparents on the mainland. So we always had thoughts of moving someday. But the day that we decided it was time was January 13th, 2018. It was 8:07 on a Saturday morning. The kids were watching Daniel Tiger in their room. I was drinking coffee and I got this alert on my phone. Emergency alert. Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. I yelled to Chris and asked if he got a message on his phone. He did, and I kept reading those words. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. This is not a drill. This is real. We're about to die. My babies are about to die. What do we do? We gathered in the kids' room. We called our parents to say goodbye. We had no idea how much time we would have left, so we held Bianca and Xander and we cried and prayed. Daniel Tiger was still playing on the TV, and we just kept telling them how much we loved them. At one point, I had this moment of clarity of watching too many zombie movies, and I said, what if we live? We're going to need water. So I started filling every container in our house with water, and then I would run back and sit on the floor with the kids, and I would go back and fill another bucket. As the minutes passed and we were still alive, my parents called and said there was nothing on the news, and how did we know this was happening? At 37 years old, when your parents are questioning you in your last moments of life, you're like, really? This is not how I want to spend my last moments on earth, Mom and Dad. But we started searching the internet for hope that it wasn't real. After 12 minutes, we got a second alert saying, false alarm. Whew. I would like to tell you that my immediate reaction was relief, and it was relief, but it was also rage, because I thought I had my babies for the last time, and I wanted heads to roll. Jesus eventually took over and said, let's just be glad that it's not real. I'll tell you, those 12 minutes, though, gave me complete clarity about one thing. Life is short. We are not guaranteed our next breath, much less the next year. This is something we're reminded of when we lose people too early in life, or we get a scary diagnosis, or when we come just close enough to death. We looked at each other and said, what are we waiting for? It's time. Now, it's not because we're naive and think that California is any safer from the threat of war, because no place on this planet is. But when you think you've held your kids for the last time, there is an urgency to take the next step, even if you have no idea what it will look like. Fast forward a few months, we're living with Chris's family up in Long Beach, and I haven't heard a peep from the Long Beach school system about a job. So I start to think, well, we gotta do something here. And I take a look on Fuller's job board, and there it is, a church looking for a children's ministry director. I checked out the website and Facebook page and learned that the new pastor's first Sunday was that week. And before I would even apply, I had to make sure this was a place I could trust with my family, because I have seen a lot, and I have been through a lot. I cannot overstate how welcome we felt that first Sunday. We got invited to the barbecue afterwards at least 3 times. And when I heard the choir sing, it's very special. I don't know if you all realize it because you've been here so long, but this is not business as usual over here. This is something. And when I talked to Pastor Kathy at the barbecue, I had a feeling that she and I would be great friends. I really loved being right. There are plot twists and detours that brought each one of us in this room to this point, this moment. Our stories are the convergence of the Spirit's work and our response. Let me be very clear. God did not send that missile alert text to my phone. God does not do bad things to us to get our attention. There are people out there who say stuff like that, and I don't know what God that is, but that is not Jesus. What I am saying, though, is that God is constantly at work, calling each of us into divine relationship and community with each other. And sometimes we end up in places we never imagined with people we never expected. Paul was looking for a man of Macedonia in need of help and instead found a self-sufficient woman from Thyatira. I love that our text makes clear that Paul didn't introduce her to God. God was already at work in Lydia. Paul didn't have to convince her of the truth because the Spirit had already opened her heart, her ears, her mind, everything to know what he was saying was true. Paul was not expected, nor are we, to change anyone's mind about anything, even if we think they're completely wrong. That is one lesson that I feel like everyone has learned or is learning in the most recent years. He's just asked to take the next step and tell people what's happened to him, and God does the rest. That is what faithful witness looks like, a willingness to be detoured. Paul and Lydia met because of that willingness, because they were sensitive to God's call in their lives. Like them, we each have a call to participate in God's mission of love and reconciliation in the world. And the best part is that it's not going to look the same from one person to the next in here. God does not call us to be nurses and doctors if we faint at the sight of blood. Friedrich Buechner said that our call is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. God has been calling each of us all of our lives to participate. This is not a drill. God's call is not a test to see if we pass or fail. This is not a drill. We are given this one life as a gift to give back. And this is something that we each do as individuals, but it's also, and maybe more importantly, something that we do together. Our participation is always a response to what God is already doing. Mary Oliver has this wonderful poem, and the last two lines ask, "Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life." This is not a drill. Will we listen and be open to what God is doing and where God is leading, even if it's not how we thought it would be? Will we allow ourselves to be detoured in order to participate in God's mission of love and reconciliation? I hope so. Let us be sensitive to the Spirit's guidance that we may faithfully respond and participate. This is not a drill.
Can you say amen?
Amen.
Amen. It is time to give our heart and our gifts to our God.